What does the word Purim mean? Who would like to tell us?
Lots.
Lots. Yes, Purim means lots. You know the answer. You're already in an elite category among the Jews of the world. What language is pour a lot in?
Farsi, Persian.
Farsi. It's in Persian. Pour is a lot in Persian. Isn't it interesting that the Jewish world is focusing on Persia, Iran at this time? I'm sure all of the discussion and thought and Torah shared must be affecting what's going on in the world now in connection with Persia. So we commemorate the lots. What lots are we commemorating?
The dates of when they were going to kill the Jews. Haman was
Exactly.
going to kill the Jews.
We are such an interesting people. The name of our holiday is commemorating the lots Haman cast to find the best day to annihilate us. Now, of course, as you probably know, he was such a cheater. He was cheating on himself, and he picked Nisan. He's like, no, that's when they got out of Egypt. Iyar, no, Sivan, the Torah. He picked literally, we have 12 months. He picked 11 out of the 12 months, and every month he rejected because something good happened in that month, or the mazel, astrological sign of that month, was too positive for us. And finally, there's like one lot left in the bag. And he's like, oh, what an amazing month. I love it. First of all, it's the day when their leader, Moses, died. Perfect. The sign is fish, and fish get swallowed up. Bad month, bad sign, perfect time for the destruction of the Jews. And of course, the sages say that Haman didn't know that Adar, and actually the 7th of Adar, yesterday, is not only the day that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, passed away, it was also the day of what?
The day he was born.
His day he was born. Because Moshe was born and passed away on the exact same day. It was actually a leap year both times, Adar Rishon. He was born on the 7th of Adar Rishon, and he passed away 120 years later on the 7th of Adar Rishon. So the Gemara says, the Talmud says, it's interesting because it could have said, he didn't know that for the Jewish people, the day a tzaddik passes away is a great day for us, right? It says, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon said, Tov Yom HaMavos B'Yom Hivoldo. It's better the day a person was born than when they die, because when they're born, they're a question mark. We got no clue what they're going to be like. When a person lives a godly, righteous life for 120 years and passes away, that's a great day. And on a more spiritual level, even than that, the first leader of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, says that every year on the anniversary of the passing of a tzaddik, all of the energy of his entire life is shining in this world on an even higher level. And poyel Yeshuos b'kerev haaretz. Great salvation. So it's interesting because the Talmud could have said, Talmud didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't know that the day of passing of a tzaddik is a great day for the Jewish people. Instead, the Gemara, the Talmud focuses on something else and says, he didn't know that was actually that he was born. And it could be like, what's going on? Yeah. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, I'm going to say this very briefly because there's so much I want to say. We've got so little time. That Moshe was different than any other tzaddik. That for every, if we would call it regular tzaddik, the day of passing is the most significant spiritual day in their whole career. But for Moshe, for Moses, when he was born, it says the house was full of light. He was born already at the pinnacle. The light that was shining when he was born was the light of Torah, because Moshe was the human embodiment of Torah. So he was born with Torah. He didn't achieve it through a lifetime of accomplishments. He was born that way. And that's why it says Moshe is true and Torah is true. Moshe emes v'saraso emes. And the truth of Moshe and the truth of Torah are one truth, and they could never be separated. And that's why the Gemara says Moshe lo meis. Moshe never died, even though we know he passed away on the 7th of Adar. But spiritually, he never died, because at the moment of his passing, his soul went into the body of the next leader of the generation, Yoshua. At the moment of Yoshua's passing, the soul goes into the next leader of the generation, because Moshe's truth, Moshe's Torah. And if Moshe's truth is not 100%, neither is Torah's. And the reason why this is so significant, going into why are we calling the holiday by Purim, by the lots, like this is the time they want to annihilate us, Yael said. This is the name of our holiday. But this was tied into a tremendous spiritual energy. We're actually told that Moshe's energy created the holiday of Purim. The salvation of Purim came from Moshe. And that's why it says in the Gemara that by Mashiach, which will happen right away, it says all the holidays will be nullified, which doesn't mean we won't keep them. Baruch Hashem, we'll still have Pesach. We love Pesach. We'll have all the holidays, but they won't be as significant, as important, as special, because every day is going to be a holiday. It's Mashiach. But even by Mashiach, Purim will be very special because it's the energy of Moshe. And Moshe's truth, because Torah is true. And if he's not 100% true, Torah is not 100% true. And in Jewish thought, true means eternal, never stops. So if Moshe's holiday, Purim, could stop, it won't be as special by Mashiach. It's a slight flaw in the truth of Moshe, which is a slight flaw in the truth of Torah. So no flaws in Torah's truth, no flaws in Moshe's truth, has to be eternal. That's why Moshe could not die, though he did, but he didn't. His soul's always in the body of the leader of the generation because he can't die. Lack of truth, lack of eternal, lack of truth of Moshe, lack of truth of Torah. And also Purim, can't stop, even by Mashiach. So this name Purim by the lots isn't like we're celebrating Haman's lots. Haman's lots were bringing out a very deep truth. He didn't know what they were bringing out, but a really deep truth that actually created the energy of the holiday. That's actually why when we say, Misha nechtas Adar Marav Simcha, we all know that line. When Adar comes in, joy comes in, we think it's the joy of Purim. It's actually the joy of the 7th of Adar. It's the joy of all of our birthday, because Moshe lives inside every one of us. So it's like the birthday of the Jewish people, the birthday of Moshe. The 7th of Adar, already the whole month is special, which is why it's the month of Purim, which is why it's the holiday of Purim, the lots, because the lots are tying into Haman's misunderstanding of the power of Moshe that really, really create the victory. So that's one understanding of why the whole name of this holiday has to do with those lots. Another understanding is a lottery means something not rational. I mean, pick it, There's no reason, you pick it. It's got nothing to do with intellect, which really, on a deep spiritual level, represents the supernatural bond between the Jews and Hashem. As we saw in Purim, we saw whatever the situation wasn't good. We were at like a really low place. This was the first time the Jews suffered that sickness called assimilation. And I mean, like, we went to the party, we messed up major, but that can't sever the bond between Hashem and the Jews. We have a supernatural bond. That's why we have supernatural protection. And that's how we're the only ancient race that still exists. We're actually indigenous. We're in our ancestral land. We have the original land. We have the same religion, the same belief system, the same people. And we're actually the only nation, the only race in the entire world that can say that. The only race in the entire world. How is that possible? How? And it's not only, well, that's cool. We're the only race in the entire world that still exists in the land, the religion. It's not only that. We're the most hated race. We're the most persecuted race. We're the race that should have the least chance of survival. And we're the only race that still exists because of this Purim, because of like the poor, the lot, because of this super rational bond between Hashem and the Jews that protects us, even when everything in nature should be going the other direction. So that's another just really fascinating concept on why we're calling this holiday by those lots. Not that Haman was thinking any of this. It wasn't Haman's ideology, but he did what he did because there's a God behind the scenes, which of course is a whole theme of Purim. And that God behind the themes, yes, that lot is very, very significant to the entire theme of the holiday that we're going to be celebrating and eating and giving food and enjoying, and an incredibly deep, deep, deep spiritual energy. Any thoughts, any questions on any of that?
I had a question.
Sure.
Okay. What about the Assyrians and the Chaldeans? They're still around today. I don't know that there's the same religion.
Okay. So interesting. First of all, for the Assyrians look to the Jews as like, help us. It's very interesting because of course, in general, we're hated, but there are those people that are still indigenous people that look to us as like, wow, you did it. You got back your land. Help us. So the Assyrians don't have their land. And
They do. Well, they all left. They've been, yes, they're persecuted.
they were persecuted. They don't have their land. I know even today, the Assyrians in Chicago
Yeah.
are turning to us to help the Assyrians get their land back because you Jews know
Right.
how to do it. You did it. It's the same reason the Indians in America support Israel. Like, you did it. Help us, teach us, guide us. We're, what do we have?
Yeah. They're
It's
missing God. That's our secret ingredient.
exactly, that's a secret. That's a secret ingredient. It's very interesting because there was somebody who was a philosophy student, actually, I believe, and he was having a private audience with Lubavitcher Rebbe. This was like in maybe the 60s or 70s. And somehow this topic came up. I don't remember enough of the details, but somehow they're discussing this concept. And he was thinking, as the Rebbe was saying it, but there's one other nation that also is the same ancient race in their same land, which is the Chinese. They're the only other nation in the world that's an ancient race. I mean, the Greeks aren't Greek and the Egyptians aren't Egyptians, but the Chinese are Chinese and they still live in the same land. So he was thinking, but that's just like us. We're not unique because it's us and the Chinese. And as he's thinking this, the Rebbe, I guess reading his mind, said, there's one nation you could think is similar, the Chinese, but the Rebbe said, but the Chinese is not, because the whole ancient Chinese belief system completely changed with Confucius. And when Confucius came and developed his whole philosophy and all of China adopted it, they abandoned the original Chinese belief system. So therefore, the Jews are still the only unique race in the entire world that's the same nation with the same belief system. And it's just so interesting when you think of that, because statistically, we have the least chance, but that has nothing to do with anything. It's God. Anyone else? Any other questions? Any other thoughts on this? I think it's fascinating. And I wonder what people, in case for us, it's obvious, but I wonder what Jews who don't know that they're religious, because every Jew obviously believes, but they don't know about that, how they understand it, like how they understand the survival of the Jews, because it just is such an obvious in your face oddity, to put it like there, strange, weird. And I truly wonder what they come up with in understanding it.
I don't think they think about it. They're not religious. That like
Yeah, I
being Jews
agree.
isn't at the forefront of their mind, and I just don't think that they think about it.
Like it never crossed their mind to wonder how the Jews still exist, even the little bit they
No,
know of Jewish history.
Yeah,
no, I
I
just
don't
don't think
think.
they think about it. No.
Yeah, I don't either. I think they also don't necessarily have unless they're like specifically a historian or philosopher, I don't think they have necessarily the historical numbers and data to even have the possibility of that thought.
Wow. It's so interesting. I remember once reading, how like you get books like your bathroom material, and I could read anything, but this book I couldn't get through. It was that boring. But somehow wound up in our bathroom. It was a sociologist, obviously Jewish, sociologist's work on the Jews in America. The whole melting and melding of the Jewish immigrants into whatever you want to call it, the American dream. It sounds like an interesting topic, but the way they wrote it was way too much data, like way too boring. So I didn't really read, like the beginning, little bits, and the end. The end was fascinating. I read like the last 2 pages, but that was all I needed to read, because this person who was clearly 100+% assimilated Jew, very begrudgingly, at the end of his whole boring data on the Jews in America, says, there's something different about the Jews, because they're the only nation that came to America and didn't melt. Every other nation melted in the melting pot of America, and the Jews didn't. And he doesn't know why. And of course, he doesn't say soul, he doesn't say God, he doesn't say anything religious, but he just says there's something about the Jew that is different, statistically proven in this whole boring book, than the entire world, because they don't melt. They always remain apart. They always remain the Jew. And I just thought that was like, he can't admit it. He can't call it soul. He can't call it God, but there's something about the Jew. And we really see this something really, really most overtly for the first time in our history in the story of Purim. It's like literally one of the themes. Of course, there are many themes, but it's literally a major theme in the story of Purim. It's interesting. the sages say, why did the Jews deserve annihilation? I mean, what was unique about Purim, which is the reason why it's a holiday for all these thousands of years, is it was the only time in world history, in our Jewish history in the world, that we ever faced complete annihilation. I mean, if you want to compare, God forbid, to the Holocaust, which was 6 million, but even as the Jews were being wiped out in Europe, there were Jews in North America, there were Jews in South America, there were Jews in Australia, there were Jews in Israel that Hitler didn't get to conquer. There were Jews in other parts of the world. Jews could have survived, even while the Jews in the areas under Nazi control were being slaughtered. And that's always been the case, except Purim. Purim is the only time where that one ruler controlled the entire known world, and on one day, every Jew in that kingdom of the world was supposed to die. So the sages say, why? What did the Jews do to deserve this? And the answer they give is because they ate from the feast of Achashverosh. For such a sin.
I'm sorry, just to jump in for a sec, that was
Absolutely.
there weren't Jews anywhere else. Like Achashverosh ruled all
Achashverosh ruled the world. He ruled
I did not know that. I
127
did not know
provinces,
that.
and that
Wow.
was the entire world.
That's so
Meaning it wasn't the world as we think of it today. He didn't rule America. But the known world at that time, Achashverosh ruled. It says Mehodu v'ad Kush, which some sages means from one end of the world to the other. And some say, no, Hodu and Kush were next door neighbors. So Mehodu v'ad Kush means like a complete circle from this point to this point, the whole world. Others say Mehodu v'ad Kush, just as it's so easy to hold these two places that are literally next door to each other. That's how Achashverosh held the entire world. So he literally was the rule. He was, in those days, it was a very popular thing to want to rule the world. The world was smaller. So it was, being the world leader was not like we might think of today. Maybe that's Trump's aspiration. But in those days, you could have the Alexander the Great. You had Nebuchadnezzar. You had Ahasuerus. You had Koresh. They were all want to be or achieve the status, for however long they held it, of leaders of the world. So why did they deserve this? So we're told because they ate from the feast of Ahasuerus. Such a crime, such a punishment, which doesn't make much sense. But before we explain it, just want to clarify, just to understand the feast and what was its significance. The people of the world were believers. They all believed in God. They might have served idols, but they know about God. And they knew that the prophet of God was a person named Jeremiah. And years before the destruction of the temple, Yirmiah was giving nevuah that the temple would be destroyed. He even said he was going to destroy it, the Babylonians. And of course, that's exactly what happened. So the world knew Yirmiah was a true prophet. They respected him. When Babylonia destroyed the temple and conquered Israel, they gave Yirmiah a lot of respect and honor. They knew he was a true prophet of God. One of Yirmiah's prophecies was, and after 70 years, you're coming home. There's going to be destruction of the temple. You're going into exile. And after 70 years, you will come back. And the world knew this. And the world was scared. And all the kings of the world were counting these 70 years. So Nebuchadnezzar knew about it, and he counted his vision of the 70 years. And when the 70 years was over, he thought he outbested God. And you might know the story about how Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, he thought he knew the real date of the 70 years. Because, of course, the question is 70 years from when? And he thought he got to the real calculation. And he made this big party when, of course, there was that famous handwriting on the wall. That's the source of that saying. And he died and he lost his kingdom that night. Now, his son-in-law, Ahasuerus, what does your father-in-law know? He thought he figured out from when those 70 years started. And he thought, the 7 years are over. God abandoned the Jews. And he was so happy. He wasn't making a party like Belshazzar for one night. He made a party for 6 months. That's actually the opening of the story of the Megillah, is his 6-month-long, 180-day drunken feast. Much worse than that. A total immersion in all the pleasures of the physical, celebrating God's abandonment of the Jewish people. And after those 6 months, he very democratically made a 1-week party for all the men of Shushan, including the Jews. And what was he thinking of? After 6 months of partying with the nobles of the world, he decides to party with the common men and with the Jews. Ahasuerus hated us more than Haman. That's what it says in the Gemara. Ahasuerus hated the Jews more than Haman. And he knew the 70 years were over, and he was very excited about that. But he also was aware that, hey, God has this soft spot for the Jewish people. I got to make sure, no going back on this. So how do I do that? I have to get them to sin. And if I get them to sin, then their God will abandon them and then they'll be stuck forever. And that's why he made that party. He made people of Shushan and happened to invite the Jews. He made it for the Jews. He made it for the Jews to sin by coming to his party. When he invited them, Mordechai, the leader of the Jewish people, the concept of Rebbe is not an original phenomenon. It goes back to Moshe, as we were just saying. And in every generation, there's always that leader to guide the Jews. And Mordechai was the Rebbe, the Moshe of his generation. And he said to the Jews, don't go to the party. You're not allowed. We are not allowed. Not allowed to go to such a party. It's forbidden. And I'm sure some Jews listened, very, very few. And most of the Jews said, Mordechai, the king's inviting us. The king's equality. He's viewing us like everyone else. We can't embarrass him. We can't turn our backs to him. We can't disgrace him by not showing up to the party he invited us to. And you know what, Mordechai? He said, go through food, so it's all good. And Mordechai said, it's still not good. You're not allowed to go to the party. You're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to eat and drink kosher food and drink at such a party. You're not allowed to go. And most of the Jews didn't listen. And which of course was Ahasuerus' point. And some Jews went and didn't eat anything, still forbidden. Some Jews went and ate the kosher meat and wine, still forbidden. And of course, many Jews went and ate the not kosher meat and wine, forbidden. But still, the Bible says, for this, they deserved annihilation. It was bad. And Mordechai told us not to, but for this, they deserved annihilation. And the Bible says, that's not what's going on here. It's not that the decree of Haman came as a punishment for their sin. The decree of Haman and Ahasuerus was the natural consequence of their action. In other words, the message we were giving to Hashem is, Hashem, we don't want this special, unique bond between us and you. We want to be Ahasuerus, thanks for like everyone else. We want Ahasuerus' protection. And Hashem says, fine. You don't want me in my protection? You want Ahasuerus' protection? Go for it. And Hashem removed that special divine protection, which we were just talking about, which is why we exist until today. And then the decree of Haman and Ahasuerus emerged. So I just think it's such an amazing lesson for us. It's such a practical theme that so many times we could think, oh, it's difficult. We can't be like everyone else. We can't go to the party. Everyone's going there. The king's giving us kosher food. We're invited to Trump's palace in Florida. We can't go. Well, no, such a pain, such a restriction. And Purim is saying, understand, this is our super special, unique protection and privilege. And sometimes that happens in our lives. Sometimes we feel limited by God's laws, by our Jewishness. And it's the Purim is saying, it's our protection. It's our privilege. We're not like everyone else. We are God's people. So in the few minutes we have left, which isn't too many, I want to briefly focus on what we have to do. Of course, we all know what we have to do and try to extract some of the spiritual meaning. Before that, anybody else have any other questions on anything I touched on or didn't touch on that you're wondering about Purim?
I had a quick question. You were
Sure.
saying that Ahasuerus, and I'd heard this before, that he hated the Jews more than Haman. So when he realized that he needed to change things because Mordechai saved him, was there a changing of his heart that Hashem did, or was it?
Absolutely not. It was, you could view it as a few different ways. You could say it was a moment of insanity when he had Haman hanged, which it probably was on a certain level. You could say it was a moment when he was like, oh my gosh, I see God's hand and I know I better comply or I'm not going to be in trouble.
Like clarity?
Not clarity of I'm submitting myself, just like absolute fear of what God would do to him. But even then, if you think about the story, what happened after Haman was hanged? He was hanged the second night of Pesach, right? 11 months later was the decree of the annihilation on the 13th of Adar. And Ahasuerus was like, oops. Yeah, nothing I could really do about that. I don't know, right? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's the rules of the kingdom. Yeah, I know. I feel bad. I can't do anything about it. Does that make any sense in the world? He had a lot of time to think of a way to annul that decree. He never did. For 11 months, that decree existed. It hung over the head of the Jews, a decree of a total annihilation. And that decree was real. A lot of times when we think of the story of Purim, it ends with the hanging of Haman, because that's probably how we're taught it when we're in preschool, and everything we know from preschool. But that's not true. Haman was hanged and the decree continued. And for 11 months, the Jews had that decree on their head. It didn't go away. Ahasuerus claimed he couldn't take it away. He didn't know how. You know, in our country, when we make a law, we are stuck. And really, this was coming from his still desire son. He sees God's power, so he's a little cowed, but he's still trying to do whatever he can to destroy the Jews. He just is like a little stuck here. And that's actually the first Rebbe of Chabad. The Alter Rebbe speaks about this at length, this enormous transformation, not of Achashverosh, but of the Jewish people. Because here we're talking about the Jews. I said it's the first time assimilation struck. It is the first time there was assimilation was by Purim. Until then, there was no assimilation. We all lived together in Israel. We weren't assimilated. The nations around were horrible to us. But here we have Jews that are on such a low level that they literally are assimilated for the first time. And then what happens? For 11 months, they stand in complete Mesiras Nefesh to Hashem, which means, as the Alter Rebbe points out, any one of those Jews could have saved themselves by changing religions. The decree is only on Jews. It's not like, racial policies like the Nazis, that if you have one grandparent who's Jewish, you're a Jew, you need to burn like every other Jew. We got to clean out the racial lines. Here it was religious. You got to clean out the religious problems. You say you're no longer Jewish, you would not have been under the decree. And the Alter Rebbe says not one Jew even thought to say they're not Jewish. And not only that, they all stayed loyal. They all kept Torah mitzvahs. And not only that, for an entire year, what was Mordechai doing to the Jewish people? He was making these massive rallies, Jewish pride, Jewish unity, Jewish strength. Haters, you want to know who the Jews are? You want to follow me home so you know my address for your 13th of Adar plans? We're the Jews for an entire year, for 11 months. The Jews did not think of leaving, continued serving God, and publicly gathered as Jews. And it's not like, so the haters were all cowed and therefore nothing happened on the 13th of Adar. That's not true, because we know that on the 13th of Adar, worldwide, the Jews killed 75,000 people that came to kill them. So there were 75,000 haters, Amalekis, that were still planning on killing us. Jewish blood was still free on the 13th of Adar. Do you imagine what the world would be like if those 75,000 people lived? Imagine how many more haters there would be in the world today. Imagine how many descendants could be alive from 75,000 people, that even after Esther's the queen, even after Mordechai's the grand visor, Jewish blood is free. We're still doing it. And obviously, I don't know if every single one that came, we killed. No Jew got hurt. But I don't know if we got all of them. We got 75,000. And then, of course, the next day in Shushan, it continued longer. So it was real. There was a real threat to Jewish life. There was a real decree. Achashverosh couldn't figure out how to change it. And there was a real resurgence of the Jewish people for two reasons, really for three reasons. The pressures of exile pull out our core. Mordechai, the Moshe, the Rebbe, pulled at our core. And the core of a Jew is one with God himself. So even though the Jews were assimilated, even though they ate from the party, even though we were not on a high spiritual level by a long shot, first time of assimilation, between the pressures of exile, pulling out who we really are, Mordechai nurturing who we really are, and who we really are. Jews, peace of God himself, absolute belief, absolute love, absolute fear, absolute self-sacrifice. We self-sacrificed for 11 months. And that's why Purim is such a holy time. It reflects that self-sacrifice. We said before that the Talmud says it's the only holiday that will still exist by Mashiach. We explained that in connection to the Moshe element. Moshe is true. True means eternal. His holiday is true. Even by Mashiach, Purim's true. Another thing the Arizal points out about Purim is that it's the holiest day of the year. That biblically, we have Yom HaKippurim, Yom Kippur, what we all think is the holiest day of the year. Ki, like Purim, because Purim's even more energy. That's why some people really are careful to find time, and it's a busy day, to say a lot of Tehillim on Purim, because it has such spiritual power that's really spiritual power saturated with Mesiras Nefesh, with self-sacrifice for God. Anyway, now in our fewer remaining minutes, anyone else have anything else to ask? Because this is about you. If there's anything else you want to know about Purim that I didn't say yet before I say a few more things. All right. So we know there's 4 mitzvahs of the day. We know there's other laws. Few ideas on the mitzvahs. So It says about the Megillah is the only scroll that we're obligated to listen to really intently. As we know, we have to hear every word. We all know that. You go to Shul on Shabbos, you don't have to hear every word of Kriyas HaTorah. You don't even have to hear Kriyas HaTorah for a woman. But by the Megillah, every one of us has to hear every word. The halacha is, if you hear the words out of order, you are not fulfilling your obligation, which the Baal Shem Tov explains means on a spiritual level, if you hear the words and you're not getting the order because you're thinking it's old news, you're thinking it's celebrating some miracle that happened a few thousand years ago, it's an old story you're hearing, you didn't fulfill your obligation. You need to read it like it's a happening now situation. I remember the Purim after October 7th, 2 years ago. I'm sure we all remember. I remember then being in shul, hearing the Megillah, and really feeling that, really feeling how every word is talking about today. But that's really how we're supposed to feel every time we hear the Megillah. And we hear it twice, right? All the other mitzvahs we just do once, we just do by day. The Megillah is twice, by night and by day. What's the theme we're supposed to hear? The most overarching theme, I mean, there's many, 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 many details. Like, of course, we'll learn when we actually learn the Megillah. But just like one major theme is everything looks random. God is the master puppeteer. It was a bunch of random events that you had no clue the connection. Like in our lives, we experienced some crazy thing called COVID. That was crazy. That was insane. And life moved on. We experienced some crazy months called Black Lives Matter, and life moves on. We experienced this trauma called October 7th. We know the story of our lives. Things happen, and then you get distracted by something else, and then you forget. That's what was going on then. There's Achashverosh drinking for 6 months straight, whatever, the Goyim and what they do, and kings. There's Vashti off with her head. Well, I mean, she deserved it. She was a horrible, wicked person. There's this beauty pageant, again, what the Goyim do. And then somehow Esther is taken, which makes no sense. She's married. She's a Jew. Somehow they don't know she's a Jew. They don't know she's married. She was older, supposed to be for the beautiful young girls of the world. She's taken. Makes no sense, but whatever. Tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. Like all of these random events that people shushki about and then move on. When you hear the story, if you're in shul, it probably takes 40 minutes. My husband can probably do it in 25 if he's pressed for time. It's just all the dots line up. That's the theme of Purim. As I'm sure you all know, Hashem's name is mentioned in the Megillah exactly 0 times. That's the theme of Purim. You don't see Hashem's name. You're not aware of it. But when you see the story, how everything works, how everything is all lined up by Hashem, that's the story of Purim. So when we're listening to it, like the Baal Shem Tov says, not as ancient history, but as happening now, it really means looking at our lives and seeing that same concept that we all live through Purim. We all have Purims all the time where I don't know why this happened. I don't know why this happened. What's going on? Where's the plan? Where's the purpose? Purim. Everything's going to line up. Everything has a point. Everything makes sense. Look for Hashem in everything. Dina?
Just quickly, was it all political? Like, did the citizens or whatever, the people who live there, like, other than the Jews, because it was affecting them, was it just like, oh, whatever's happening in politics, like, whatever, like he's drinking and they have this rule? Was it, because I could imagine nowadays how, like, okay, we sort of have a pulse on what's going on, but like not, we're not like crazy involved or what, I don't know.
Do you
Like,
think you're questioning, are the Jews more or less involved than the rest of the world? Was
yeah,
that
and
your question?
was it kind of like um specific to the political end of things, like Ahasuerus, and I don't know if it works the same way now as it did then, but like was it just like a political thing of the king doing this and it happened to
I
affect
would
the
think in a
Jews?
certain way the Jews might have been more conscious because they were so vulnerable to what was going on in the political arena. But in another sense, it might have been less involved because there's sort of this detachment. Like that's what the Goyim do, so to speak. Like they're drinking for 6 months straight, nothing to do with us. Vashti's gone. Okay, good. She was really horrible to all those Jewish girls she could abuse. So it might have been more in a certain way, it might have been less in a certain way. And it probably for each person was exactly where they were positioned, their relationship to events. But for everyone, it was random. None of it made sense. And nobody saw this is a plot and it all works perfectly. This is a script and all the storylines come together. Nobody could see that until after. So that's sort of the point that Baal Shem Tov is making. And he's saying in general, live it as now which is in our lives. When we don't see Hashem, it doesn't seem good. It seems random. And sometimes in our lives, we could go through that and then say, oh, that was God. He was pulling the strings. He was doing it for my benefit. That's my Purim. And that's what we're supposed to live with all year round. Squeezing in, trying to think, bunch of different things we could say. One point, obviously this Shabbos before Purim, it's biblical, Mida Oraisa, to hear the portion about Amalek, Parsha Zachar, which you could either fulfill by going to shul and listening to the Maftir Kriya, hearing every word of that like 3 sukkim of Maftir, which we hear about the eradication of Amalek. If you can't get to shul on Shabbos, and you can get to shul Purim morning before the Megillah reading, to hear the Kriya is the same Kriya. Why do we read this? Well, we have to. It's a biblical obligation. So why do we do it now? Because, of course, we know this was Haman. Haman is the descendant from the Amalekim. And anyone who has an absolute hatred of the Jews is a descendant of Amalek. If they're called Hamas, if they're called a Nazi, if they're called Saddam Hussein, if they're called Sinwar, Amalek is hating God and hating the Jewish people. And we have an obligation to hate them and to do anything we can to eradicate them. Amalek is also a spiritual aspect inside ourselves, like a moral virus that derails us by making us cold. Amalek is the same numerical value as Safek, doubt, pulling off our enthusiasm for God. That's our inner Amalek we want to eradicate, right? The Jews left Egypt and everyone's like, whoa, they're invincible, they're untouchable. And Amalek comes and pours cold water on everyone. We can fight them. Okay, we lost, but we can fight them. You can fight them. They're not so invincible. And for the Jewish people, it was like, oh my gosh, God, he took us out of Egypt, 10 plagues, splitting of the sea, giving us the Torah. And Amalek is like, I mean, he's God. What do you expect? Deflating that enthusiasm, cooling us off, giving us doubts. That's our personal Amalek we need to eradicate. And now's a great time to do it. Of course, the mitzvahs of the day, besides Megillah, sending the Shalach Manos, giving the tzedakah, eating the feast, all of which has sort of the same theme: Jewish unity, Jewish friendship, Jewish love, practically helping each other. They're all expressing this very Jewish point that, as I'm saying, is one of the themes of the story. As we see, for those 11 months, the Jews gather. That's our power, our unity. In terms of, there's a few customs of Purim that all express the same theme. One custom is by the meal, by the Suda. The custom is to eat kreplach. Of course, the Jewish food of Purim is a hamantash. And of course, the Jewish custom, which is not a modern custom that we're just picking up from the people that we live in their culture, it's a Jewish custom. It's discussed in the Gemara, is wearing costumes. So the idea of kreplach, the idea of wearing costumes, and the idea of hamantashen is all exactly the same. It's all the same theme of nothing's what it seems. Like we said, God's name is not in the Megillah once. How do we see this? What's a kreppel? A kreppel is you have some delicious filling covered in a dough. No clue what's inside. Costume, you're in disguise. The whole story of Purim is God's in disguise. Find God in disguise. And the same thing as the hamantash, which actually is a total mangling of its name, right? Hamantashen, people say, oh yeah, Haman's ears, Haman's hat. Hamantash has nothing to do with Haman. Nothing to do with Haman. Right now in Israel, they say Oznei Sinwar. I saw that after October 7th, like Haman's ears, Sinwar's ears. It's nothing to do with Haman, it's nothing to do with ears. A hamantash was called a muntash. In Yiddish, a tash means a pocket. So muntash means a pocket of mun. Mun, poppy seeds. So the original Purim pastry, the muntash, was dough, this triangular dough that you don't see what's inside, but buried under that dough is this very, very sweet poppy seed mixture, a muntash. Somewhere in the generations, mun, that must be Haman, became a hamantash. And then since it's triangular, it became Haman's hat or whatever. It's really a muntash. And again, the same theme. I don't know what's inside. Nowadays, it could be chocolate, jam, the original poppy seeds. The reason why the pastry was with poppy seeds is because what was Esther eating in the palace all those years? No one was allowed to know she was Jewish, so she couldn't order from the kosher takeout place. She couldn't eat any cooked food in the palace. Nothing was kosher. So she survived on raw nuts, raw seeds, fruits, vegetables. That's it. Strict vegan diet, nothing. And so so those poppy seeds were symbolizing the food Esther ate for all those years. A montage. Again, the krepel, the montage, not the way hamantash might be made today, but how they originally were made. And the costumes, it's all the same theme. We don't see God. We see random. We see nature. We see strange things. We see things that make absolutely no sense, but it's not nature. It's God. It's not no sense. It's God's kindness. It's God's miracles. And that's actually how Purim is different than those other big holidays like Pesach, Passover, Shavuos. It's all about like, the 10 plagues. The whole world saw the hand of God. Splitting of the sea. The whole world sees the hand of God. Hanukkah, a flask of oil burns for 8 days. Nature breaking, nature defying hand of God. We don't see that in Purim. There's nothing in the story that you could point to and prove is a nature breaking miracle. And that's the miracle of Purim. The miracle of Purim is that it's such a high miracle, it could fit into the box called nature. Kabbalistically, according to Hasidus, it explains that the higher the miracle, the lower it can come down. So it has to be that high to fit into the box of nature. And that's, again, we might not see the oil burning for 8 days in our lives. We might not see the splitting of the seas in our lives. But Purim, we can and we must find in our own life where it's not coincidence. It's not random. It's God. I don't see God's hand. I must still be in the middle of the story. If I would see the full picture, it's not random. It's a montage. It's not that dough. It's something very, very, very sweet and precious on the inside. And that's the lesson and the story of Purim. All right. We only went like 5 minutes over and we covered a lot of beautiful concepts. And there's many, 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 many more that we did not. Any questions before we finish? Anything else you want to know? Wondered? So a few ideas here tonight. There wasn't that much time. Take ownership of something and remember it Monday night and Tuesday to make your Purim joyous and meaningful and to really, really utilize those very, very, very precious moments. And again, Yom HaKippurim, Yom Kippur ascends to almost like the potential energy of Purim. It has that much power. Okay. Thank you so much for joining. Have a very, very, very joyous and meaningful and special Purim, and especially this year, whatever's going on with Iran, for sure, stuff happening. So we should see it.